यथा पुरस्ताद्भविता प्रतीत औदालकीरारुणिर्मत्प्रसृष्टः सुखं रात्रिशयिता वीतमन्युः त्वां दृशिवान् मृत्युमुखात् प्रमुक्तम् स्वर्गे लोके न भयं किञ्चनास्ति न तत्र त्वं न जरया बिभेति उभे तीर्त्वा अशनाया पिपासे शोकातिगो मोदते स्वर्गलोके सत्त्वमग्निं स्वर्ग्यमध्येषि मृत्यो प्रब्रोहितं श्रद्दधानाय मह्यम् स्वर्गलोका अमृतत्वं भजन्ते एतद्वितीयेन वृणे वरेण प्रते ब्रवीमि तदुमे निबोध स्वर्ग्यमग्निं नचिकेतः प्रजानन् अनन्तलोकाप्तिमथो प्रतिष्ठां विद्धि त्वमेतन्निहितं गुहायाम् लोकादिमग्निं तमुवाच तस्मै या इष्टकायावतीर्वा यथा वा स चापि तत्प्रत्यवदद्यथोक्तम् अथास्य मृत्युः पुनराहतुष्टः तमब्रवीत् प्रीयमाणो महात्मा वरं तवेहाद्य ददानि भूयः तवैव नाम्ना भवितायमग्निः सृङ्काञ्चे मामनेकरूपां गृहाण त्रिनाचिकेतस्त्रिभिरेत्यसन्धिं त्रिकर्मकृत्तरति जन्म मृत्यु ब्रह्मजज्ञं देवमीड्यं विदित्वा विचाये मां शान्तिमत्यन्तमेति त्रिनाचिकेतस्त्रयमेतद्विदित्वा य एवं विद्वांश्चिनुते नाचिकेतं स मृत्युपाशान् पुरतः प्रणोद्य शोकातिगो मोदते स्वर्गलोके एष तेऽग्निर्नचिकेतः स्वर्ग्यो यमवृणीथा द्वितीयेन वरेण एतमग्निं तवेव प्रवक्षन्ति जनासः तृतीयं वरं नचिकेतो वृणीष्व।
हरि ओम। So the 16th mantra, the Lord, pleased with Nachiketa's ability to receive the knowledge, was very pleased, and he gave him 2 additional boons. He said this fire ritual I grant you the additional boon, this fire ritual, which we learned as additional boon he is giving, where you can perform sakama upasana, where people worship with an underlying desire, which obviously Nachiketa, as we understand, has not accepted. He has rejected it. So Nachiketa refused to accept the second of the bonus boons, as it is evident he is not interested in anything worldly. So he has approached the Guru with utmost vairagya, which is a total dispassion for the lower, which is an essential quality of any sadhak, which is what is clarified here and becomes evident as we get into the text further. 17, please.
त्रिणाचिकेतस्त्रिभिरेत्य त्रिकर्मकृत्तरति जन्म मृत्यु ब्रह्मजज्ञं देवमीड्यं विदित्वा विचाये मां शान्तिमत्यन्तमेति.
Whoever invokes Nachiketa fire thrice, Trinachiketaha, then he used the word Tribhihi, and has united with the three Sandhim, union, and has performed the three kinds of duties. Karmakrit, three karmakrit. The three kinds of duties overcomes Janma and Mrityu, birth and death. Having known this idiom, idiom Devam, adorable, bright, omniscient fire, born of Brahman, and having realized him, he attains everlasting peace. So the mantra here indicates that the Nachiketa ritual can be performed in two different ways. One is you perform Kevala karma, which is you only perform the karma, which is to attain the fruit of Swargaloka. Swarga is a heavenly benefit where you perform unselfish karma to attain punya. The second is upasana sahiti karma. You perform the karma with upasana. Upasana here means you're worshipping the highest. So along with the karma, you perform upasana. Such people, they are transported to another heaven known as Brahmaloka, where you exhaust that and then you attain liberation. Now, doesn't matter what the mantra is indicating. As a whole, if you understand that there are four basic parts. So the four basic parts, the first is when you perform action. When I say four basic parts, four basic possibilities when you perform actions. First are the class of people who perform selfish actions, actions which are tainted with a selfish motive. Because as you understand, action by itself is not selfish. An action stained by your selfish motive makes it selfish. Otherwise, action is neutral. Action is very pure. So when you perform selfish actions, what are you subjected to? You are subjected to demerit, as we call as papam. You will be subjected to the bondage of cycle of birth and death. Because such actions creates multitudes of desires, you will be bound to be born to the cycle of birth and death. Now, I am mentioning all this because the mantra gives a reference to two parts. The two parts are taken from the four parts that we are talking about. So the first is acting on selfish desires, acting to gratify your own selfish ego. Such actions accrue demerit, means they will be bound to be, there is that strain. Like other day, somebody came and told me that I am having so much stress that I am woken up from sleep. I'm unable to sleep. I said, is it the weather, summer? No, it's not summer. It is the summer inside my head. I'm so much stressed with life that I'm not able to sleep. So you will have the cause of pain, the source of pain doesn't matter, but you will be subjected through enormous trauma. That is stress. And that is because of your own selfish desires, selfish expectations, actions with selfishness and ego. The second is when you perform unselfish actions. So these are the class of people. They perform actions with a spirit of service, with a spirit, they are constantly thinking in terms of sacrificing themselves for the larger good. But what is important to note is even unselfish actions are desirable. So there is that motive, there is a desire to serve, there's a desire to help, there's a desire to uplift others. As a result of such unselfish actions, you are rewarded with punya. Now, punya is you get punya for merit for your sacrifices you do. Such people, they go into the realm known as Swargaloka. Now, this loka, where you enjoy heavenly moments, heavenly benefits, and after exhausting, what happens? You come back to the cycle of the world where you will again be subjected to birth and death. So you will go through heavenly experiences, but come back. So this is known as path of return. So the first two are the path of returns. In fact, the first part, they don't go anywhere. You are in the world itself. Second is the path of return, not the first. The second is the path of return. The third is when you perform unselfish actions along with selfless actions and meditation. So the third combination is you perform unselfish actions, plus you're performing selfless actions, culminating in meditation. So because you're performing unselfish actions, what do you get? You are transported to another heavenly experience. They call that as Brahmaloka, a superior heaven compared to Swarga. So you go through that heavenly experience. As any credit note has a limitation. Am I right, Gayatrima? Any credit note means you have only a certain amount. Once you use that, it gets zero. So this credit note of Brahmaloka after you exhaust the punya, you are transported to Brahman. You get self-realization. Now, what is the cause of moksha here? Is because you have clubbed unselfish work along with selfless actions. Because of selfless actions, because you have performed meditation, you are taken into the highest experience, which is Brahman. So this is also known as liberation in stages, also known as Krama Mukti. It's not difficult to understand. The third type is you perform unselfish actions for which you get Brahmaloka. You perform selfless actions and meditation, you get Brahman. But since you are performing unselfish actions along with selfless, you have to experience the punya of unselfish also. So where do you go? You will get to Brahman, but in stages. For example, in airline terminology, it is you're reaching a destination via transit. There are 2-3 stops before you get there. So if you 2-3 stops, what will happen? There will be a delay in you reaching a destination. You will reach, but a delay. Now the fourth is a direct flight, non-stop, long haul, as they call. These bigger airlines, aircrafts, they don't need to refuel. They don't need to stop. Directly from here, you will land in New York. From Mumbai to New York, direct flight. So no stop anywhere. 18-20 hours. That is known as Kaivalya Mukti, where you only perform selfless actions along with meditation. So in the back of your mind, you must always know and have these 4 parts, so that whenever there's a context or mention of these, you will understand. So of the 4, the mantra gives a reference to the 2 categories. The mantra gives reference to the 2nd and the 3rd category. Now, which category you all belong? UK is very seriously analyzing. Which category, UK?
Dangling between 1 and 2, I think.
Oh, 1 and 2. Yeah, 1 and 2 சொல்றீங்க.
We are still not trying to come to the 2nd stage, at least. That is only.
To find someone of the 4th order is extremely rare. Means that student or that sadhak must be at such a high level that there is no blemish of desire, there is no stain of ego or selfishness. So only perform selfless actions. As you know, how would you define selfless actions? Any idea, UK? How would you define selfless actions?
Well, not an iota of thinking about the result or even about your own selfish intention, Guruji. It is totally service-oriented.
No, that would be unselfish, isn't it?
Like somewhere you are thinking of the result that you will get punya by doing this.
Selfless.
No, that is the second this thing, Guruji, unselfish actions. Like, but still
Yeah,
there is
but-
an expectation of punya. But
Correct.
selfless, extremely you are thinking only, I mean, you're just doing it without any selfish motive, without any, this thing for the benefit of others. Absolutely without any expectation, without any.
We have to be very mindful when we define selfless, because it's so difficult to paint a picture. Hmm?
I mean, it is unimaginable also, Guruji, at least at this stage.
Oh.
I mean,
No, you can imagine it. You may not be able to perform it. Imagining is not a difficulty.
even to understand that extent of selflessness is
Because we use the term selfless so loosely. We don't understand the intensity, because that's where the selfless actions take a leap from unselfishness.
exactly.
We can understand unselfishness with
Yes.
reference to selfishness, and there are grades of unselfishness, right?
Correct.
Grades. To
True.
what extent can you go to serve?
Yes.
To what length will you go to serve? Will you
Yes.
take an initiative to serve? Will you put yourself in difficult situations or challenge yourself to serve?
Yes.
There are grades in that realm of unselfishness.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But selflessness is a leap from unselfishness. Right. Arunama.
Hari Om Guruji.
Hari Om. So how do you define selflessness?
Selfless actions meaning we do not have any desire, any worldly desires. The only desire that you have is the desire to get to the self.
Selfless actions is when you are driven with the only desire to attain the self. So when you perform actions, there is no motive attached to it, isn't it?
Yes.
No motive with reference to the worldly things. Obviously, there is a motive to get to the self. So the desire for the self. So the desire for the self is categorized as a transcendental desire, isn't it? So
Yes.
the transcendental desire is no desire with reference to the terrestrial world. With reference to the world, there's nothing that you desire. So that desire for the self replaces all worldly desires. And that's the most difficult situation to be, where you don't desire anything from the world. So you don't entertain any motive. Then the actions that you perform in the world, you may be performing various actions. What drives you to perform those actions? If that be so, yes, ma'am.
No, I thought we are performing actions only that we are fulfilling our obligations, our dharma.
You're just performing your obligated duties. Almost tantamounting to mechanical action. When you perform mechanical action, how do you explain mechanical action? Almost tantamounting. I'm not saying selfless actions are mechanical actions, please. But how do you define mechanical actions?
You just do it for the sake of doing it. I mean, you do work because you have to do it, not for the joy or the result or whatever you get out of it.
Correct. There is no interest. You don't seek joy out of it. You have no interest in it, but you do it because you have to do it, isn't it? That kind of attitude you bring to the all other actions, but you do it with joy. Not you don't seek. You're not doing it to seek joy from it. You get it?
Yes, Guruji.
Which is the opposite of that is I run into the world to an object or being to seek joy from it. Like if I believe that there is a certain joy in an object or being, how do I rush into it? It's like a child being tempted or desiring to have an ice cream. There is that craving, there is that rush to find joy in that object. Where is that rush into the world to find the joy? Where is it to just be and do whatever is demanded, whatever your obligations are, you do it without that rush from inside. So you may carry on, but selfless actions is there is no, the blemish of desire or motive doesn't exist with reference to the world. And that kind of, thanks, Ma. That kind of selfless nature, to find a seeker of that order is extremely rare. Very, very rare indeed. So why we say is the sadhak must have done so much karma, so much sadhana in the previous janma that he is left with hardly a very handful of desires that he just needs to burn off that last little fuel of desires. So in the last leg of the spiritual journey, one performs selfless actions. Otherwise, you just look within and find out. You peep within, you'll know. Your actions are stained with motive and selfishness. So the mantra is talking about two, as I've said. First is you perform karma just to attain Swargaloka, which is unselfish, the second category. The third category is where you perform upasana sahita karma. You perform karma along with upasana, which is you perform unselfish work along with your selfless and meditation. You get to that stage where you attain liberation, which the mantra qualifies. He says, having known this adorable, bright, omniscient fire, he says, born of Brahman. Because you attain Brahman, he says you are born of Brahman, Brahmajnanam. He says it is Devam, it is bright, it is idiom, it's adorable. He uses these three adjectives to qualify the second path. Obviously, you don't glorify the path of attaining Swargaloka, but one who wants to attain Brahman is glorified. Now, there are few terms that are used in the mantra which we need to get clarified. So he says here, Trinachiketaha, he who performs Nachiketa fire thrice. So again, thanks to the Shankar Bhashya, we are getting here interpretations of what the word thrice means. He uses the word three, thrice, performs the duties. He talks of three duties and so on. So firstly, Trinachiketa, the Nachiketa fire thrice. So first interpretation obviously is one who performs this fire ritual 3 times. Like every one of us, we go to a temple, what do? We do Pradakshinam thrice. When the Pujari gives Tirtham, he gives 3 times the Tirtham. When you put in ash on your forehead, you put on 3 stripes. So it's all 3. So the word 3 has a significance. So perform the ritual 3 times, the first interpretation. The second interpretation is one who studies, one who recites, and who performs the ritual. And perhaps the third interpretation is when he says performs the fire ritual thrice, he's referring to the often performed 3 other rituals known as Garhapatya fire, Ahavani fire, and Dakshina fire. So these are all the Vedic rituals that perhaps if you look into, you will get an idea what they are. Tribhi Sandhim, one who is united with the 3. Three interpretations to the word united with the 3. Redigar, are you lost or are you with me?
Yes, Guruji, definitely last. These interpretations with respect to the 3 means we are interpreting that the meanings of 3. Is it the one interpretation means?
Yes.
We are guessing
Again,
either of these 3.
it could either of the 3, yes. Or it could mean all 3 or either of the 3. And that's where we are getting these interpretations from the commentaries of Adi Shankaracharya. That's why we fall back on Shankara Bhashya. So the one is the original text. The original text may not say it all. Like we are reading the original text. The original text only says this. But then you find great gurus have commented on this. So they are bhashyas. So Shankara Bhashya is an authority on these Upanishads. So when you read the Shankara Bhashya, which some of us read so that we are able to draw the meaning, so that we can able to share or understand the deeper meaning.
So what could be the probability of either of these 3? That's
Yes.
where we need to draw the line.
We need to draw a line. We need to understand.
Okay.
So Gayatri Ma, share the invocation, sorry, the verse again, please, the mantra. So if you read, whoever invokes Nachiketa fire thrice. So the first aspect we have said, the 3 interpretations. And has united with the 3. Tribhihi Sandhim. So what is united with the 3 suggests? For that, we are giving 3 interpretations. The 3 interpretations are the father, the mother, and the guru.
Okay.
All right. United with the 3, the father, the mother, and the guru. Now, there is a similar reference of this in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So if you follow that, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is a reference of a conversation between King Janaka and the sage Yajnavalkya. Now, in that conversation, Janaka says he also learned from the 6 acharyas, who all the 3 acharyas, so all the 6 acharyas had all the 3, the father, the mother, and the guru. So the united with the 3, the father, mother, and guru, the first interpretation. Second interpretation is the 3 sources of knowledge. What are the 3 sources of knowledge? First is pratyaksha, which is direct perception. Second is through anumana, you infer. The third is through agama, which is tradition. So the 3 sources of knowledge. The third learned from the 3 pramanas. The 3 pramanas First are the Shrutis, which are the Vedas, which are the authority. The second are the Smritis, which are texts based on human recollection or human memory. And the third are the declarations and conduct of wise men. So Tribhi Sandhim, united with the three, could suggest these three possible interpretations. And then he says, who has performed the three kinds of duties? Trikarmakrit. What are the three duties you must perform? The first is, again, three interpretations, or three duties refers to, one interpretation. Which are the three reference to? The three duties. First are the study of the Shastras, which is the Swadhyaya or Adhyaya, you can say. The second is performance of the scriptural activity, which is Ijya. The third is you perform charity, Dhanam. So you study the Shastras, you perform the various Karmakanda, the various activities prescribed in the scriptures. The third is you perform Dhanam, charity. These are the three duties. So one who has performed the Nachiketa fire thrice, who has united with the three and performed the three kinds of duties, overcomes birth and death. So the first half of the mantra, this is what is the first half. This refers to remember I said the mantra is talking of two kinds of paths. This refers to performance of Kevala Karma, where you perform actions with a fruit. Such people, what are they transported? They overcome birth and death in a relative sense. Where there is birth and death, what is implication when you say birth and death? See, whenever we use the word birth and death, philosophically, birth and death you take from experience to experience. Because you may not be able to relate to the absolute level of physical birth and physical death. Relatively, when we philosophize, you are moving from one experience to other. For example, if you have, in a day, you have so many experiences. What do? We are dead in one experience and you're born in another experience. For example, this morning I was dead in my house at 4:15, and at 4:30 I was born in the center. Then after the satsang, I'll be dead here, I'll be born somewhere else. So the death of the previous experience brings about the birth of a new experience. So there is birth and death, death and birth. So when you move from one experience to other, what does it bring about? Now, this should not be difficult to answer. Jai Shri Ma. When you move from one experience to other, where there's a depth of one experience and the birth of another, what does it create?
Some wisdom.
Wisdom. Just by
extent.
being dead and
Getting
born,
some
if you get
experience.
wisdom,
Getting
in
some.
that sense. No, all right. No, your thinking is all right. But if I were to bring you back to the thought process, when you say he overcomes birth and death in a negative context. So when you do all the three, which is referred, which is invoking the fire, uniting with the three and performing the three duties, you overcome birth and death. So the context of birth and death is a negative context here, right? Now I said, let's not interpret birth and death in an absolute sense. Relative sense, you move from one experience to other, where there's a death and birth. Now, when you move from one experience to other, what does it create? Okay, whole day you are in the house. You're not moving from different places. You're not having 4 or 5 meetings at different places. No, you're in the house. You're carrying your normal activities. What is the difference between being housebound vis-a-vis hopping from place to place? No idea. See, when you move from experience to experience, what we experience is change, isn't it? Don't we experience change?
Yes.
Change of environment, change of people, change of different situations. Because you're moving from one place to other. You're born into different experience, aren't we? Vis-a-vis being in the same experience, or you're not you're confined to a similar experience. You're not moving on. For example, this 1 hour 15 minutes, there is no change. We're all confined to this classroom. There's no change. Right? Now I ask, where there is change, what happens?
We get experience of we are experiencing that real situation.
Then
And
what we'll get?
we
You will
try
say we
to
gain wisdom.
improve. No, we try to improve for the next. That experience will help us to improve.
No. See, you're again thinking in the earlier line of thought.
Yeah.
We are saying birth and death is being interpreted in negative context. It is being interpreted. When you say overcome birth and death means what? You are getting over something negative. So we are giving a palatable meaning to the word birth and death.
Reaching the higher goal.
You're not able to think in the line of thought, which is all right. Once you put the dots, you'll be able to connect. No issues. Now, what we are trying to say is, where there is birth and death, there is change. Wherever there is change, there is suffering. When there is no change, there is no suffering. A beautiful, simple example we are given. So simple yet so profound. Imagine you are sitting under a light, and if that light is flickering, what does it cause to you? Doesn't it annoy you? Doesn't it disturb you? That change of the flickering is the change of light coming and going. That is disturbance, is annoying, is pain, is agony. But I could have what they call as a 0-watt bulb, you use it, in your bedrooms at night. Just enough light that you can find your way. I may have a 0-watt bulb, but it's not flickering. I'll be able to adapt to that light. I may be even perhaps able to read something under that light. So anything that is subjected through change causes pain. So when you perform unselfish work, which the first half of the mantra is saying you get punya, you overcome birth and death, means you overcome sorrow and suffering in life. There is no pain, you don't go through agony, you don't suffer. So the word birth and death philosophically means suffering, isn't it? Like if you have to travel from here to another part of the world, it's change of environment. Oh my God, I have to travel, I have to go to another place. It may be your daughter's place, it may be your son's place, it may be your relative's place, but you're going to a new place. You have to adapt. It is a change of weather, change of place, change of time zone, change of habitat, change of lifestyle. Everything it's going to cause you pain, to like it or not. So when he says you have overcome birth and death, means you are free from the sorrow and suffering. When you perform the first mentioned kevalam karma, but one who performs the upasana sahiti karma, one who performs the same karma along with upasana, along with selfless and worship, they, he says, having known this adorable, bright, omniscient fire, what do they get? They are born of Brahman. Such people attain everlasting peace. They become the Jataveda. Jataveda, the Sanskrit word, means you become the all-knower. You become Brahman. This is such a power-packed mantra with so many components that are there, so many interpretations, so many concepts that are there. But once you get a hold of it, you're able to paint a picture. Otherwise, you find too many blocks without knowing. It's all jumbled up, chaos. Now, if I don't mention this, I'm not doing justice to the mantra. If I mention it, you're confused, being confused. Now tell me what I should do. We'll ask Subhashji. Subhashji, please advise, what should I do? Sir, could you please unmute yourself?
Confusion
Yes,
is
sir.
better. Confusion is better. It is better to be confused rather than not knowing anything.
Okay, sir. Thanks for the permission. I shall continue to liberally confuse you all. Huh? It's not that difficult once you get hold of the terms, because these are all interpretations, right? But you're following, Subhashji?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right. Thank you. So, as I said, in short, the mantra is giving interpretation to the two parts. We have taken reference to all the four parts. Of the four which you have taken note, the mantra is talking of, first half of the mantra talks of the second category. The second half of the mantra talks of the third category. Don't worry, Srinivas Garu, I'll not ask you to summarize what was said. Right, we'll move on to the, okay, anything, SR?
Could be put it in the form of a chant, Guruji. Like when we're talking about, I'll just make a understanding. Like invoking of fire is a point number one. Then united with three is a point number two. And performing three karmas is the one where we will overcome birth and death. That's the
Correct.
meaning of
Yes.
the whole.
Yes.
Yes, I think without Guru, I don't think we do lifelong sadhana also, we don't get meaning of the two crisp sentences, which is so power-packed, as rightly said, that it is that. Maybe to get further clarifications of every united with the three, you have again further three. Three duties also you have further three. Maybe in the form of a chart could be helpful, Guruji.
Gayatri Ma diligently does takeaways after every class. So maybe Gayatri Ma,
Maybe
this
later
particular
on.
concept can you capture as a chart? Possibly, yeah. So as a chart, then it gives the entire perspective.
Perspective. Thanks, Guruji.
So at the top, you classify actions into 4, and then mention of the 2 parts, and then classify the mantra into 2 parts. Okay, right. 18, please.
त्रिणाचिकेतस्त्रयमेतद्विदित्वा य एवं विद्वांश्चिनुते नाचिकेतं स मृत्युपाशान् पुरतः प्रणोद्य शोकातिगो मोदते स्वर्गलोके।
So Lord Death is repeating and concluding his advice on Nachiketa fire with a glorification of karma and its fruits. So he who has performed the Nachiketa fire ritual thrice and knows the 3 liberates from the shackles of death before death. So the interpretation which we gave liberates from the shackles of death before death. What is the shackles of death? Pashan, the word mrityu pashan, the chains of death or shackles of death, goes beyond sorrow and rejoices in heaven. So this is the clarification to the interpretation we gave in the previous mantra. Prapodhya mrityu pashan. And when is it? Purataha, before death. Liberated from the shackles of death before death. The first half of the mantra is repeating what we said in the previous mantra. Correct, Shivaji? The first half is just repeating. He who has performed the Nachiketa fire thrice. He who knows the 3 which we have interpreted is liberated from the shackles of death before death. So this section is being repeated, being clarified. So the first death, the shackles of death, refers to the first death liberated from the shackles of death before death. First death refers to the death of the ego or the death of the individuality. Such a person is liberated from the cycle of birth and death, which is also known as Videha Mukti, not Jivan Mukti. Shivaji, Videha Mukti means one attain self-realization before their actual death. Means these are men who live a life of self-realization until they attain samadhi. Means if any one of you, any one of us, in fact, can attain realization this moment, so you will be pronounced one who's attained moksha, and yet you may live another 10-20 years or more until you attain physical samadhi, the death. So there is a lifespan of men from moksha to samadhi. This is known as videha mukti, means you can attain realization well within your lifespan. This is what the Shastras are actually endorsing. Liberate from the shackles of death before death. So the second death, the word purataha, is the death of the physical body, which is a samadhi. So the Shastras are very strongly endorsing that one can live a life of realization until they attain the physical death, which is videha mukti. So I repeat, the first death refers to the death of the ego or the individuality. Now, what does the death of ego or individuality, how to put it? When is the death of the ego or the jiva, as we call? Gayatri Ma, when is the death of the ego?
When the individual feels that he is one with the Brahman, that means he has his ego is totally death of his ego. It is
Not what you feel, no. But what marks the death of the ego is it's a better way of putting it.
self-realization.
Correct. What is that which marks the attainment of self-realization? Attainment of self-realization or death of the ego is the same. But how do you describe that state? When does one attain that state of self-realization? Or when is the death of the ego? Exhaustion of all your desires.
Vasanas.
Exhaustion of all your vasanas is death of ego. Otherwise, we don't know what death of ego is, isn't it? Ego is as long as
Vasanas are there.
Vasanas are there.
Desire.
Ego stands erect as long as the vasana support it, which is symbolized to a candle. In a candle, there is the wick. The wick stands erect because of the wax around it, which holds it erect. When the wick is burnt, when the wax starts melting away, in the process when the wax melts away, the wick has no strength to stand on its own. It will also fall off. So the wick is the ego, the wax is the vasanas. So when the vasanas are burned with the fire of wisdom, the light of wisdom, the wax burns away, the ego ultimately dies. Such a beautiful example of the wick, the wax, and the lamp, which is the lamp of wisdom. So the ego is the wick, the wax is the vasanas, the lamp of wisdom is the light is the lamp of wisdom. So let the wisdom burn away the wax. In the process, the ego gets completely destroyed. So the death of the ego symbolizes the death of destruction of your vasanas. So when that happens, you are declared to be realized. But that is not your physical death. That will take time. Such a person goes beyond sorrow and rejoices in the heaven. So you can take it relative or absolute. Yes, Hariji.
If the death happens before the physical death, I think it is called Jivan Mukti. Only those people who have got Jivan Mukti, like Shankara, Jagadguru Shankara, they still live for some more years. Whereas in Videha Mukti, it means that you get the final death or final mukti after losing the physical body. So if death happens before the death, it is called Jivan Mukti, because they are mukta in this life itself.
I think we have said swapped it, right?
No, you meant you said.
I meant that. Yes, I have used the term wrongly, but what is meant is what you're clarifying. Thanks, Hariji. Yes, yes. Jivan Mukti, actually, so the clarification is Jivan Mukti. Shivaji, you also right. Jivan Mukti is you will attain moksha within your lifespan. Videha refers to only at the demise of the physical body, one may attain realization. There is a clarification. You're right. So what was meant is what is clarified. Yes. Thanks, Hariji. So again, clarification. The mantra talks of shoka digataha, modate swargaloke, free from sorrow, rejoices in the heaven. This refers to only when you perform karma, unselfish karma, you experience that. But when you perform upasana, which is meditation, then you attain self-realization, which is explained as liberated from the shackles of death before death. So he's repeating what was said in the previous mantra, he's again reiterating here. I'm glad he reiterates, because hopefully the confusion is little less. 19.
एष तेऽग्निर्नचिकेतस्वर्ग्यो यमवृणीथा द्वितीयेन वरेण एतमग्निं तवेव प्रवक्षन्ति जनासः तृतीयं वरं नचिकेतो वृणीष्व.
This is thy fire, O Nachiketa, which leads to heaven, which you have chosen as your second boon. People will call people will call this fire as thine name alone. O Nachiketa, now you choose thy third boon. So the most profound concept of yajna, that fire ritual, which is the very means for your spiritual evolution or the means to attain the highest, will be eternally called as Nachiketa Yajna. Can you imagine? The only means to get to Brahman will be called eternally as Nachiketa Yajna. So you will be eternally known, O Nachiketa. Thou be blessed this is your second boon, you shall be granted. And then he says, please choose your third boon. See, Lord is little concerned because he gave 2 additional boons unasked for. He doesn't want that third boon to be forgotten either by Nachiketa or by him. Because if it's forgotten, there will be the runam. He will be indebted to Nachiketa. So before Nachiketa forgets, he says, please ask your third boon. And the third boon actually marks the real start of the Upanishad, which is the next mantra. So till now, it's just the backdrop of the whole Upanishad. The 20th mantra starts the real Upanishad, because that is where Nachiketa is asking about Atma Vidya. Tell me what happens when the body dies. What happens to the Atman when the body dies? He says. What happens to he? What happens to him? What happens to the Atman? Does the Atman die when the body dies? And then you will have to listen to the great sermon by the Lord of Death. We will come back to that the next satsang. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.